Real quick, let me direct you to my new self-publishing imprint, Envious Editions. There's a link in the description here for my big cartel. I self-publish my own stories for art's sake. Boring, Lizard Laughed, Blammo, my Eisner-nominated Ignatz-winning comic book series started in 2007. Very legendary. You can get your own copies of any of these comics directly from me. Hit that link, and I will send them to you. You won't find these in stores. I don't distribute these in stores. Just through my big cartel. Hit the link. Thank you very much. Enjoy the video. It's so interesting, Jerry Moriarty, he left New York and then moved back into his childhood home. And
Yeah,
that's
I talked to him a night before he left.
was he
He
nervous
said
about
that
doing
he
that?
was, no, he said he was going to go be the pervert in his old neighborhood and he was going to paint murals in his house. And I don't know what he's done since then. I'm not in touch with him.
Yeah, I wonder. He's never sold any of his work, I heard.
Wow.
Keeps
Well, he was a peculiar guy.
Yeah. Were you friends with him at SBA?
Not really. I mean, I knew him, I was friendly with him, but I didn't get close to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys were both in Raw at the same time and stuff doing that whole, you were part of the same scene and
Yeah, but I'm a hermit. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of people and I know 10,000 people.
Mhm.
So, but when I taught, I just kind of wanted to do my class and go home. I didn't really want to get involved in school politics and so on. But I'm friends with Tom Woodruff and Keith Mayerson.
Yeah, I heard this is kind of jumping topics, but I heard that you met Jack Kirby one time. You like went to his house.
I
Nice.
did. When I got to LA in 76, um, I looked up, I noticed he was in Thousand Oaks and I looked in the phone book and he was listed.
Wow.
So called him up and he invited me and my friend Justin Carroll to come over. And unfortunately, he told us to come over on Thanksgiving. So I called him back and I said, "That's Thanksgiving." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm in trouble with Roz for that. Come the next week. So we went to see him. He was Jack Kirby,
Hmm.
working on very modest little table, little pencil, nothing. And there was a page he was drawing from the upper left down like a magic white screen.
Wow. Did you recognize what the comic was that he was drawing?
It was one of those third world or fourth world
Oh,
things, whatever they were called. That's what I mean. I like Kirby since till the 60s. One of my friends stayed up all night and talked me into it in the sixth grade
hmm.
because I thought his stuff looked like wax, melting wax or something. But he convinced me he was great, and then I liked him. But when he left Marvel, that's when I really, like a lot of people, I got all of those comics that are worth $2.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I love it. And when I met him, I had a lot of questions for him, dumb questions. And but I asked him if he was into Mayan work because his stuff looked kind of like
Oh.
mosaic locked together, and it had space, yet it was flat and it was unusual. He said, "I look at everything. I look at the National Geographic. I look at everything.
Yeah. And I wonder
I
because
go,
your dad owned a dime store, right? Is this the same era that you had been reading Kirby comics?
no, that was in the. My father managed dime stores for when I was real little. Then he came back to it later. He tried different things, selling real estate. He was a traveling salesman, sold
Mhm.
chemical fertilizer. When we
Oh.
lived in Brownsville, Texas, he came home with a giant stack of comics that were funny animal comics, like Sylvester and Tweety and stuff like that.
Oh.
But my grandmother, who was a Native American, had a nervous breakdown, and we left Brownsville in the middle of the night and never came back in the middle of my first grade school year. So I never finished the first grade.
Wow.
And the comics didn't get shipped to where I moved to.
But they weren't the good funny animal comics. They were like a Dell, like crappy Dell comics.
Yeah, I like all that stuff. I
Yeah.
like I like third rate hippie comics and
Uh-huh.
third rate funny animal comics. And, you know, I mean, I like certain things.
Hmm.
And so I can't say, you know, like I'm not a giant fan of that little bear you know, Bongo the bear, you know.
Yeah, right.
I think Crumb might have been into that, but that
Hmm.
wasn't one. Scamp was not my favorite.
Hmm.
Little Scamp, Dumbo and Lotta and Dot, and
Yes,
they had an
Lada.
interesting look to them. They had a thick and thin brush style, which I thought was interesting because I didn't know how you made that.
Hmm.
Comics were magic. Like, how do you do it? When I started doing comics, I had no clue about paper or pens or that you
Yeah.
could. I didn't know you could pencil and then ink and erase the pencil out from underneath.
Oh
That
yeah.
took me a long time to learn, you know, even
Yeah.
as a hippie.
I did that too. I
So
remember when I was like trying to get into comics, I used a Bic pen because I didn't know
yeah,
what the difference was.
yeah,
And I
right.
didn't understand. I'm like, how do people not smudge this? It smudges every time. And you try to erase the
Yeah,
pencil from underneath it, and it takes most of the ink with it and everything. It's just like so
yeah.
frustrating to
Well,
learn that stuff.
in high school, I discovered rapidograph pens and I
Hmm.
discovered empty books. And that was a revelation. Sketchbooks and a rapidograph. But then, of course, when you buy your first rapidograph, you buy one that's too small.
Oh yeah.
And so now I still use rapidographs, but I use like a one or a two, you know, or a zero.
How did you learn about rapidographs?
You see pictures of them in hippie comics, you know.
Hmm.
It's like you see like they're drawing with them. And then I went to I don't know where the art store was. I don't know where I got this stuff. I guess it was in Dallas, you know. Because
Yeah.
I was an art nerd since I was about, well, a little kid. My dad was a painter,
Hmm.
an amateur painter, cowboy and Indian stuff, and he was fanatically obsessed when I was tiny. We lived in a house trailer. And so I got the bug, and when I was a baby, he started teaching me rendering and shadows and basic perspective and stuff when I was tiny.
Hmm.
So I never did little kid drawing. I did stunted grown-up drawings
Oh,
by the first grade, you know.
wow.
But
And then you just kind of unlearned all of that as you went along? Was it sort of getting rid of those influences or
still
something? I mean,
trying. I'm still trying.
yeah.
No, it's like I was not. I was always interested. I'm left-handed, and I was shaky. For some, I shook all my life,
Mm-hmm.
and so in rapidographs, trying to get them going, it helped me make this kind of sewn line that looked kind of like bad print jobs, which I liked bad print jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and I liked bathroom graffiti and stuff like that. So woodcuts, and so that's what I was kind of trying to emulate in like 71 when I kind of had my breakthrough was the end of 71
Hmm.
of
Was that?
doing this kind
Yeah.
of zigzaggy stuff.
I think I've seen some of that stuff like in your sketchbooks. It has like your very earliest drawings you were doing, where it'd be sort of like mounds that made up the shape of a person, but then they'd be like cross-hatched, kind of densely, like early 70s. Maybe I'm thinking maybe 72 or 73 or something is when that.
Yeah, that was they were in sketchbooks. One was published in the Zongo comics.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
very obscure one. They only made 500 of them because my stuff wasn't selling, so they printed less and less. So by that issue, they like turned the press on and turned it off,
Oh, really?
you know. So they
Real
didn't make too
quick.
many of them. Yeah.
Yeah, those are I don't have any of those. Those are impossible to find, those Jimbo comics. I've never seen them in the wild. I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
they made a lot of the first one and a lot of the Dante one of the
Okay.
last one. And
Oh,
so then, but they progressively made less. And then Dante looks slicker, so they made more of it.
those that would have had the same distribution as the Simpsons comics, right? So you would have seen your Jimbo comics like in a 7-Eleven or something, which is weird to think about.
Well, Matt was, you know, my friend, and he would like ask me like how many fans I thought I had. When I thought, well, I don't know, 40,000, I don't know. But
Wow.
I only have 5,000 fans. I
Yeah.
still only sell like, you know, 5,000 books. You know, I've never had a big readership, but I
Hmm.
get a lot of attention
Hmm.
somehow.
Yeah, you do find out quickly when you get your books published and you're like, wait a second, like what was the print run on this? It's still in print? How many
So
copies?
Matt was making people buy Jimbo and the other Zongo comic by what's her name?
Mary Fleener.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and And then I did some things that were dirty in them and really angered the comic dealers, you know. And
Uh,
Matt wasn't happy either. But I was kind of like being true to my young self, which can be a mistake.
yeah. So what was he giving you like a page rate to do those comics at the time?
You know, it was like I think it was per issue, and I'd actually started doing them thinking I would do a quarterly for Fantagraphics. So I
Oh.
started drawing them, and I started drawing them really simple.
Hmm.
And I thought I'll tighten up and see how it goes, but I'm going to start really simple. And then people thought I wasn't even trying. So I don't know. You know, it's like um, I had a weird career, you know, because
Yeah.
really I was started out to be a painter
Hmm.
and I was into modern art since I was about 10. So that's what I wanted to do. But as the 60s happened, everything could be considered painting finally. Dance could be considered painting. Anything could be considered painting. And when I saw hippie comics, I was like, wow, I'll
Hmm.
put this in my painting somehow. But that didn't really work out. I didn't end up making stories and paintings. I tried, it didn't work. I have friends that it does work for them, you know. Trenton Hancock, he
Hmm.
does stories in his paintings.
Yeah, you're an interesting one of the people or one of the things I took from you as an artist is that you can do whatever you want. Like you're all over the place and it doesn't matter. People will follow you because they like you. They trust you in the art that you're going to create. You know, they know that they're going to like it because they like you. And I always try to do the same thing with my comics. Like I only do comics, but I always think like I'm going to do a comic that's like this time, and then I'm going to jump and do a comic like this. And I don't, and I just trust that I'm going to keep the same readership because they know that what I give them is going to be a certain level of quality or whatever, storytelling or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're going to follow me because of that, you know. And I'm not going to stick
Well,
to like one particular character, you know, just do
no,
whatever.
but it looks like you drew it. And
Hmm.
even though I jump around stylistically, that's one thing I did on purpose was like draw every kind of way I could draw. It
Hmm.
still looks like I did it, but it's not like Keith Haring, where if you get Keith Haring to do something, oh, it's a Keith Haring. So
Yeah.
when I was a illustrator, people had no idea what I was going to give them, you know, and I didn't know either. I was trying to figure out what they wanted and to solve their problems. So I didn't have, you know, if they said, do whatever you want, be like, really, you want something psychotic, you know? So no,
Uh-huh.
they really want something psychotic, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes it was easier for people that were influenced by my work to make something more digestible and that looked nicer, you know?
Did you see a lot of that like early on? Did you see a lot of people that were trying to mimic your style? You could tell they were ripping you off or something?
Yeah, I'm influenced by everything. When I went to Japan the first time, there were posters all over Tokyo that looked like my work, you know,
Oh, wow.
on Coke machines and stuff. But the people that were really popular in Japan when I went were Terry Johnson
Hmm.
and Yosuke Kawamura, and their work was everywhere also, but it disappeared after a few years, and so did mine.
Are you still popular in Japan? I mean, do they still reprint your stuff and
I have no clue. I think I achieved a kind of odd level of respect in Japan,
hmm.
but people that like went to the top in America, Keith Haring, Kenny Sharp, people that were on the covers of magazines, that has more of a cultural import, I think, on other countries. I had more influence in among French artists,
Oh.
you know, that want to send me a picture of their penis, you know,
Uh-huh.
and I got like, you know, which was kind of amazing, not the penises, but that I had an influence on this scratchy kind of stuff all over the world. And
Yeah.
I got pretty sick of the penises. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Well,
now I'm old. I have zero interest in that stuff, you know. I mean, I like nice stuff now.
yeah. Did you see this book? I'm sure you have a copy of this. 1,000 pages of Bruno. What do you say? Bruno.
Bruno, no, I haven't seen it, but Bruno sent me 1,000 pages of letters.
Oh, really?
He sent boxes of letters, and we had this correspondence where I would write him one letter and he would write me 50 letters.
Oh.
And when we started out, his work looked more like S. Clay Wilson.
Hmm.
And then when he saw my work, it became more cubist and kind of shattered.
Right.
And with me, I was influenced by the darkness. And also he would say, Gary, use more ink, more sex. Send me the sex. And I didn't really draw sex a lot. And I
Uh-huh.
was friend with Jay Cotton, who's like a dirty joke guy.
Hmm.
And so I did dirty comics with Jay, supporting his humor. But that burned me out on that. Well, enough was enough. I'm not like, that's, I like sweet, nice things.
Yeah. I'm
I
the
like
same way. I
picture.
remember that's Crumb told me, like that was his advice to me, is like write about your sex life, like get into that stuff.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, I have no
No, it's
interest
Crumb
in
was,
that, you know. Yeah.
I don't think Crumb's a fan of my work at all, but he's been very nice to me whenever he's
Hmm.
been around. And he
Yeah.
came to visit me and Matt Groening in LA in the 80s sometime. And we drove him around town and had lunch with him and stuff. And, I got to meet all those guys. It was an honor, privilege to
Yeah.
meet the whole underground comic world and become friends with Spiegelman and a lot of people, Tim Deitch and a lot of people.
Hmm.
And so I like had this like magical life in some way, of meeting all these interesting people
Yeah.
and knowing to not bother them. That's the thing. It's like I have like troubled fans, and that's why I'm becoming not so nice
Hmm.
because I'm trying to keep people away.
Hmm.
Because if you're nice to people that are troubled, then they really want to write you every day.
Hmm.
And if you please them, they're nice. And if you don't please them, they're a little scary.
Do you have people that just
So,
like on Facebook or something will just message you all the time?
yeah, once messaging happened, people are writing me all night long
Oh
and
yeah.
sending me videos of them dumping food on themselves and showing
Mhm.
up at my door, like scary stuff and
Oh
rude
man.
stuff.
Yeah, I'm
So,
sorry to hear that. Yeah. I have that same where like I'll just like on a Facebook Messenger I'll be like, "Oh, somebody wrote me something. Let me just answer them real fast. I'm doing something." Well, and I'll type out an answer and then immediately I see their little icon drop down like they just saw like they're waiting
bing.
for me. And then the three dots mean they're about to respond and I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm not trying to have a conversation. I was just trying to answer your
Yeah.
question."
Yeah. So I want to say, do not try to visit me. Well, it's like me. It's like I'm friends with Ed Ruscha,
Hmm.
but I don't bother him.
Yeah.
R. Crumb's been really nice to me, but if I write him a fan letter, it's only every 10 years, and I
Right.
don't expect a response. Not that I'm those guys. I'm just a guy. I'm fairly
Right.
obscure. But people, well, the thing is, like you and I,
Hmm.
we're making art and we're offering it to people pretty cheap, and
Hmm.
they can get the art. And that's what they're supposed to get. They don't need me. They don't need for me to cook them a taco,
Yeah.
which people have asked me to do. Hey, can I come over and you can cook for me?
What?
You know, it's loony.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got like, I know thousands of people. I have 100 wonderful friends,
Mhm.
and I'm blessed.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you giving me this time to talk to you, Gary. I know that you're
Well, you're
busy.
cool.
I'm
You're
cool.
like,
I'm a
you're
cool
one of these
dude.
people that are on fire making art. It's like a
Oh
gee.
yeah.
There's people that are undeniable. There's a lot of people that want to be, I want to be a cartoonist. I want to be an artist or something. And some people are um, underpowered and still
Mhm.
do great stuff. And some people have a lot of power and produce, and you're one of those people.
Yeah, thanks. So you grew up really religious and so did I. And I wonder if that had something to do with our kind of aversion to doing like sexy work. Because I'm not,
Did you
I
say
think,
religion?
yeah, yeah, I grew up Mormon.
Yeah,
So it was very,
you're
like
going to hell.
me? Oh, according to you. Yeah, according to you.
No, I grew up in a church where everyone else is going to hell.
Yeah, that's wild.
And
But
I was
didn't
really raised to be a preacher.
I just wonder if like do you feel like you still kind of have any like did that leave any kind of impression on you like growing up religious like where you're just like
Yeah, yes. Yeah, no, I was raised and my whole family's in this, typical Texas American religion that talks about Jesus every day and everything's measured by Jesus and it's crazy. I mean, I I like being nice. I'm totally
Mm,
for being nice and I'm the basic principles of Jesus or Buddha or whoever, I'm
Mhm.
all for friendship and forgiveness and humility and everything. But slavish devotion to going to church made me insane.
Hmm.
And so being an underground cartoonist, then that made it my generation. Then you joined up and you did transgressive stuff, which I
Mhm.
did stuff like that. I did a lot of stuff like that. But in a way, that got it out of my system.
Yeah.
So
But you didn't do like a lot of like anti-religious art.
I mentioned it a lot in interviews, and I'm an angry person, on that count.
Huh.
Uh, I mean, I try. I'm not. I'm old now, so I'm much more well-adjusted probably than I was when I was young. But that was propelling. Rebelling as a youth is kind of a normal thing. But yeah,
But do you think that if you were raised in a church like the Episcopalians that were more loving and stuff and accepting, you think you still would be a Christian?
I don't know. I was asking questions. Because the Bible, as I was taught, it was the whole holy, divinely inspired Word of God,
Right.
and I had problems with that, and I had problems with going to church 4 times a week and Sunday school and Wednesday evening and Sunday night and all that and all the revivals and having this hammered into me, and you have the existential questions you have, and if you ask preachers that, then you get in trouble, or you feel like the big men in the church are going to drag you out and beat you up or something.
Right.
But anyway, I was a good Bible student, so they sent me to Ireland to try to convert to bring Jesus to Ireland.
And did that worsen your faith? Like that whole experience, did that make you go like, I want to get out of this? Or was that a fun experience for you?
I kind of had questions since I was a small child, but that was great because I was reading Lord of the Rings and there was a lot of art in Belfast, and there were museums, and I discovered Eduardo Paolozzi, and
Hmm.
I got to see the giant billboards by artists all over town. And no, I mean it was just a gradual escape, of kind of taking the fetters off your head.
Hmm. What if you were asked to, or you're commissioned to, like design the inside of a church? Would you be against doing that, or would you do it?
No, I wouldn't really be interested in doing that. I'm not interested in doing any commissions at all, really, anymore.
Oh,
I'm interested in making my art, my comics, and my paintings. And I don't have I don't have, I'm not collected a lot. I'm lucky in that people show me, and I sell a little bit. But on Google it says I have $6 million,
oh, that's nice.
but I don't. But I'm not wealthy or anything.
That's why
I'm
you're
just
harassed by weirdos.
No, I know rich people. I know some rich, nice people that are Democrats, even.
Yeah. Well, sure. You know Matt Groening. Or how did you meet Matt at the time? Was it just through the newspaper strips or something?
We were drawing, both of us. When I got to LA, there was not punk rock. There
Hmm.
was a magazine called Wet Magazine, the magazine of gourmet bathing. And it was an art magazine started by Leonard Cohen, who's an art and philosophy writer. And he showed me Matt's cartoons, and I thought they were neat. And so I wrote Matt a fan letter, and then I ran into Matt at a party, and he handed me one of his comics and he walked off. And I said, "Wait a minute."
Hmm.
And we started talking, and we're both friends of fanatical fans of Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart and oddball music, though he has encyclopedic knowledge about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we became friends, and we both broke. And I would go over to his house, and Matt wore shorts, like
Uh-huh.
I don't know, shorts. And so he would lay on the floor, and coins would roll out of his pockets while he was reading, because all he did in those days was lay around and read, as far as I can tell.
Hmm.
And when we got broke, we would go over and look through his carpet, and there would be quarters there. So I thought he was kind of rich because he
Wow.
wasn't spending every single nickel. And we would go to Astro Burger nearby and buy a chili cheeseburger and split it
Wow.
and talk about Frank Zappa.
And you were doing mini comics that, because Linda Berry has that collection where she reprints some of your early mini comics that you were mailing her from LA at the time. We.
I first went to quick print places
Mhm.
because when I started, photocopies were still crappy and gray.
Mm.
And so I went to quick print places. And also, there were artists in Dallas before I left Dallas that had collectively rented a color Xerox machine. So I had access to color Xeroxes. And so the first comic I did had a color Xerox cover and a quick print interior. Then the second comic I did was printed at the Women's Building by Frank, the lesbian folk singer, and it was black and white, and it was a kind of a slick print job, offset. And then I discovered good, high quality photocopies and switched to that. Matt was working at a photocopy place, so his photocopy comics were elaborate. They had fold outs and different colors of paper and so on.
So it was like you, Matt, and Linda Berry and Charles Burns kind of had their own little click through the mail, like sending comics to each other.
Matt had gone to school in Evergreen with Linda Berry and Charles Burns, and
Oh,
he was an editor at the newspaper, as I understand, and used them, Charles Burns at least. And so I guess I met them through him.
hmm. Were you doing a
And
newspaper strip at the time?
not really in Dallas. I mean, I left Dallas because I couldn't find any work, and I was in a performance art band, and we performed in galleries and the Houston Contemporary Art Museum, and we had a radio show that helped propel the Subgeniuses into existence.
Oh,
And so we were getting famous from that because nothing was happening really in Dallas. And so I was driving around trying to get work. I was working as a janitor in an insurance building. And so I drove my pickup to LA, and
wow.
a ride was $75.
And you just all your samples under your arm, just going door to door looking for work.
All my weird shit I did in college, it
Yeah.
was not commercial, you know. But I went around at record companies and a few magazines and immediately got hired to do spot illustrations. And through Justin Carroll. Justin Carroll was a successful young illustrator in LA, and he was the only name I knew of a person. He
Hmm.
was a friend of a friend of mine. And so he put me up and let me sleep on his couch, and actually traded a painting for a car, his
Whoa.
old uh, his old Toyota,
Hmm.
and really kept me from starving. And so I went around, faithfully, and people started hiring me.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any purchase in galleries. My stuff just didn't fit.
What kind of stuff were you showing them? Did you have sketchbooks with you that you were showing, or did you have like actual samples, like with overlays and stuff like that?
I was doing paintings on paper. I was a painter as much or more. The drawings were like, the sketchbook kind of stuff
Hmm.
I'd done in college. I studied with illustration with Jack Unruh. I
Hmm.
studied printmaking with Lee Baxter Davis, who's kind of a famous Texas artist. And I was at this art school in Texas, in the middle of nowhere in Commerce, Texas, that was amazing place.
Hmm.
And I had older hippie brothers, like figuratively speaking, who gave me the acid and the mushrooms, and I had hippie adventures, and it was time to leave Texas. And so I arrived in LA the year before punk rock hit,
Hmm.
and saw Slash magazine, and I went, wow, that's where my stuff belongs.
Yeah. Do you still listen to punk? Do you still identify with that stuff, or you moved
I
on?
was more into post punk and just oddball stuff. I like punk rock okay, but most of my record collection is 60s psychedelic records
Mm-hmm.
and post punk and experimental stuff.
Do you feel like your career was sort of like that you had? Was there like ever a phase where you felt like this is Panter mania, or was it sort of like a slow build of like year by year it gets a little bit better, a little bit easier, you get more clients? Or was it, did you have like some like you felt like this is it, like I've made it or anything?
No, I never had a lot of clients, but my stuff, when I invented it in 72, it immediately started affecting everyone around me. It
Mm,
started affecting everyone's work. And because at that point in time, hippies were getting tighter and tighter and tighter and snorting coke and
uh-huh.
using airbrushes and that was the whole thing, stippling.
Mm,
And so when I came up with this jagged stuff, which was really a throwback to a lot of many kinds of things, then it like had a big influence on people around me
hmm
in Texas and then in LA. And then in Slash magazine, it was seen all over the world, really.
mm,
When I went to Japan, like I said, there was influences. I would go into a bar and there'd be like a little flyer, like my work laying on the bar. And
mm,
then when Pee Wee happened, then I got more visibility, but it was really at the service of Pee Wee.
hmm
So that show was tailored for him.
hmm
So, and actually, I shouldn't mention LSD, but there's more of my horrible LSD visions in Pee Wee than there is in my own work. Because my horrible LSD visions, I was kind of advised by my psyche to not use that stuff.
Oh, okay.
Anthropomorphic stuff. When lawnmowers talk to you, everything's alive and
Hmm
everything's talking.
What, so the but so like in Slash, that's where Jimbo was invented, right? In Slash magazine.
I invented him in Texas in 74. And I aspired then to have him run somewhere. And I started trying to do prototype comics. Glenn Bray has that art now,
Okay.
my prototype Jimbo strips.
Yeah.
But then when I saw Slash, I was like, oh, Jimbo's a young teenage kind of guy.
hmm
He'll fit. And I like weird music. And so, I'm looking for, it's like, again, I don't know about you, but I was looking for something to happen. I'm interested in culture. I
hmm
was interested in fads. I was interested in having an effect on culture.
hmm
And so I was looking for a place. And Wet Magazine was a place that I could get published. Album covers had visibility all over the world. Doing covers for Frank Zappa, even though they were unauthorized. The Zappa fans all over the world knew about me all of a sudden.
So Jimbo in Purgatory was an issue of Jimbo the comic from Zongo, right? I'm sorry to bring it back, but I'm curious
Yeah,
about.
it started there. And then I started, well, I'd mentioned one, Dante, and Jimbo in Paradise. That collection was named Jimbo in Paradise. And I thought, I've never read Dante. That's kind of embarrassing. So I started reading Dante and I was like, oh, here's like this kind of seeker observer guy going through this thing over and over three times. And it was like a kind of a, seductive pattern to follow.
Hmm
And so, and also bad things happen in my life. And I needed something to devote myself to purgatorially so I wouldn't commit murder.
hmm
And so then I was able to devote like 5 years to Jimbo in Purgatory and not go to jail.
And that was the whole like I'm gonna do one panel a night thing. That was that whole process for years.
Yeah, because I'm slow. And also, it's like Jimbo's a kind of a muscly guy that I don't think of him as a muscly guy, but they're not particularly good anatomical drawings
Huh.
because I'm looking at the whole thing. I'm never really slowing down to like, my father had the Vesalius drawings laying around when I was a baby,
Hmm.
those flayed people.
Oh, awful. Yeah.
And so that was like, he had those men's magazines. He's this ultra Christian guy,
hmm
but there was those men's stag magazines laying around like Men's Adventure, with like Japanese people torturing women and stuff. So I had this real fruition of weird stuff around me. And go to church and they're talking about going to hell forever. And and so it was the 50s, and the 50s metaphorically and kind of really was black and white,
Huh.
except for Kodachrome pictures. And when the 60s happened, suddenly color dawned on the world, and the world of ideas exploded.
Hmm.
And it was just wonderful for me. That's why I'm still devoted to the 60s. A lot of things went wrong and a lot of stupidity happened. but that's why I'm still toying with the 60s.
You were old enough to be like a hippie at that time, right? But you were just not with it.
I was 16 in the summer of love, but I was under the thumb of my dad.
Hmm.
So I didn't get out of from under the thumb of my dad till 1969 when I went to college. It's like the 50s ended in 76 in the bicentennial year. That's when people stopped flashing the peace sign.
Yeah.
And then disco happened and punk rock happened. But yeah, I was able to be a hippie. And especially when I went to college and got adopted by these graduate students. And we were going around driving a Lincoln Continental through pastures and taking acid and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm slow. I'm working on another issue of Crash Pad, but it's taken me years. It'll take me years and years to do a 32-page comic.
Why is that? Why does it take you so long to do
It's hard.
it?
I have to race it 40 times before I ink it, you know. And I mean, a lot of the comics I do, I make myself do them. I
Hmm.
decide on a style and I work in that style.
Hmm.
And there's styles that are easy and there's styles that are hard. I could do easy comics, you know, but I'm not.
Yeah, I have the comic book version of Crash Pad. I don't have the deluxe
Yeah,
hardcover, but is it the same material? Or is it
yeah, it's
okay?
the same. The next Crash Pad I want to publish in the Choctaw language.
Wow, really? You know
I'm a
that?
member of the Choctaw tribe. I don't speak it, but I can find translators in Oklahoma.
Are you like
And
one third native? What is your
who knows? I'm probably an eighth at most, you know. My
okay?
grandma, everyone was cheated of their blood. And
Hmm.
so my grandma, her brother's listed as full blood. She's listed as half. So my father might have been half, but he was listed as a quarter.
Okay.
So, but I'm not brown and I didn't grow up around people. I was around some people speaking the language, but they didn't tell me anything.
Huh. You do have those features though. I mean, I would if somebody told me
Yeah,
this
I
is
look like
indigenous
Crazy
man.
Horse Monument.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, yeah, okay, I could see that, you know. Yeah.
So do you think you could live on Mars?
Well, it depends if my family's with me. I couldn't do it alone. I need my at least my family.
But if you didn't have your family,
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I lived in Columbus, Ohio, when I was a single man, I had my apartment, and I one time I realized like I haven't talked out loud for like 2 months. I
yeah, that
swear to
happens to
God.
me too. And like you're your voice is kind of screwed up because you haven't used it.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
haven't even left this apart. Like I have all my, I have every episode of Twilight Zone on DVD. Like I would just have whatever just playing on TV, and I'd just be like in the zone working on comics, and it's wonderful to be in that little cocoon of just everything you love and then your creativity, and that'll sustain you, I have that
Did you
personality.
see Godzilla minus one?
Not yet. I want to see it really bad, but I don't want to go to a theater to see it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's the best Godzilla movie ever made.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Everybody tells me that it's the best one. Since the very first one, it's the best one.
Yeah.
You're not interested in having a TV, Gary, just to watch old movies or anything?
I would never get out of bed. I would just lay in bed and watch CNN stories over and over and over.
Yeah.
I would be a vegetable. Also, I was a pothead for 50 years and
Uh-huh.
I'm not anymore. I timed out.
Yeah.
My body won't, my lungs and my mouth won't handle it anymore.
Wow.
So my creative life was tied to smoking a little pot, you know, not a lot, but steadily smoking pot. And so I've had to relearn, you know, because, you know, I just don't go to that place, you know,
Yeah.
and do it. So it's a
Yeah.
little odd. It's like not having TV.
Yeah. Well, I think that was like Moebius, that like French cartoons. I think that was his
Yeah.
secret was he would smoke weed and then draw.
Yeah. No, it's like instant, a little more sensitive, you know,
Hmm.
focused. For me, it was.
Do you drink or anything?
No, I had a margarita yesterday. That's the first one this year.
What about coffee? Do you drink coffee?
No, I
Okay.
drink chocolate milk.
Oh, that's your thing. Chocolate milk.
I have chocolate milk for 2 meals a day, or maybe 3 meals a day. And then I have a real food sometimes.
Yeah. Do you like cooking, or do you cook for yourself?
I just started again. I didn't cook for a long time, and I just cooked the other day, and I'm about to cook again tomorrow.
Gary, I had this book that you did called Cola Madness that was published by
Yeah,
this. Was that a real publisher that published that? Like Funny Garbage is what it's called.
that was one of the only books they ever did. They were a media company, and they did websites and all kinds of
Oh,
stuff, and they're connected to the Red Hot organization that was an AIDS charity that's ongoing.
hmm.
Uh, they were started by three friends of mine, and they made a lot of money for a few years, and then that boom ended. And
Oh,
so while they were booming, they published the book, but they didn't have a means of distributing it. So I
oh,
had a lot of them until I had to get rid of a lot of them
hmm.
because you can't sit around with like
No.
40 boxes of books.
Was that something that Fantagraphics distributed for you or something? How did you get those out there?
Just variously. I sold them, I was selling stuff online to survive during
Mm,
recessions and stuff. I was
mm,
selling stuff on websites,
mm.
and some people would buy, a few of them to distribute. I don't know. It's floating around on eBay now. Most of my stuff you can find on eBay either stupidly expensive or
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like either $20 or it's $500. I'm like,
There's no reason to buy it expensively. It'll show up cheap eventually.
yeah, but not those issues of Jimbo though. Those issues of Jimbo, if you find them on eBay, they're $400 a piece or something. They're really expensive.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. You need to collect those with Fantagraphics or something and get those back out.
They want to, but I don't want to. See, the thing is, I don't want to be involved in that stuff. I'm
Hmm.
old. I want to keep making art while I'm alive. I
Hmm.
don't want to like revisit the past or catalog stuff, or
Hmm.
I just want to keep moving forward because time's a wasting. I'm
Yeah.
trying to draw Crash Pad 2, at like a panel a month, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I
I-
painted a lot. I painted like, I don't know, 33 paintings in a year. That's more than I ever painted.
Do you ever go back and touch up a painting that you did a long time ago?
No, and I can't really correct paintings. I have to like do them and they're done,
Hmm.
and I keep them or I throw them away.
Oh man.
But I'm very methodical. I'm not like, oh, the painting. I'm not like, I mean, a lot of painters, they go in and they sling paint every day. I'm not that kind of painter. I think about it. And
Yeah.
also on Instagram now, there's people that use like hundreds of pounds of paint on everything, tubes of paint. How do you afford all that paint? Every line's a tube of paint.
Yeah.
I can't afford that.
No. So you did Cola Madness. It was like just a graphic novel that you drew and then just put in a suitcase somewhere and forgot about?
My agent in Japan, Mr. Ishii, who brought me to Japan
Hmm.
over and over, he wanted me to do a graphic novel, and I was happy to do it. So I did it for him, and then it was too weird, and he couldn't sell it in Japan.
Huh.
So it just sat around for a decade, and then Funny Garbage were fans of my work, and so they published it, and then they didn't distribute it.
It was that they came
So
to you and said, "Do you have anything for us?" And you're like, "As a matter of fact, I do have this."
they were friends, and they knew about my stuff.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, in fact, two of the guys, Chris Capuzzo and Peter Girardi, they went to SVA, and they were never my students, but they were fans of my work, and I knew them since they were young. They were graffiti guys, and I'm not from the graffiti generation.
Mm-hmm.
Though I used to go graffiti writing, such as we did down in the LA River with Matt Groening and Carol Lay and Byron Werner and uh, Leo DiCaprio and George
Well.
DiCaprio and his mom and stuff in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
We would troop down in the LA River and spray rat finks and stuff.
So was that were you really into like Rat Fink in the when you were a
Oh
kid?
yeah, I was from the rat fink generation. See, the thing about my father, he was a tough cowboy,
Mm-hmm.
and I was into every fad. So I wanted like a rat fink hat and mattress shorts, and
Uh-huh.
sandals, and would go on vacations and just embarrass him to death. He gave me money one time when I was in college to buy clothes, and I went to the hippie store and came back dressed like Snow White, basically. And he didn't kill me. He hated me, and he loved me, and I love him, but he's gone. But I drove him. We both drove each other nuts.
Did that make you nervous when you found out you were going to be a father? Like thinking like, how am I going to continue being an artist if
I
I'm
was 40 years old, so I was ready to be a father when it happened.
okay?
I would have been. I was married. I've been married 3 times.
Oh, okay.
So if I'd become a father earlier than 40, it would have been very problematic.
Hmm.
But at 40 with Aline Silverman,
Hmm.
it was fine, you know. And she's a book and magazine designer, and I'm, what I am. And so Olive went right in between us and became a sign painter, which is something neither of us can do, but it's derived from our love of old signs and stuff.
Wow. Yeah. No kidding. That's great.
Yeah, no,
Is
she's
it?
a,
They still go by Olive? That's still their name.
yeah, she's Olive Panter.
Okay.
She's Pantero on Instagram. Pantero.
Okay. And they post sign artwork.
She's probably painted. They probably painted 50 storefronts in Brooklyn by now.
Wow. No kidding. That's
Gold
great.
leaf. Went to trade school, and they went to Cooper Union
Hmm.
and got kind of beat up by that experience.
Hmm.
Moved to Chicago for a few years, and then went to a trade school in LA to study with an old sign painter, and then moved back to Brooklyn.
Do you remember like was Raw like that whole experience of like getting involved in that crew? Was that something that you have like clear memories of, like how you met Art Spiegelman and Francois and things like that?
Well, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know if I remember moment by moment, but
Yeah.
I wanted to be part of a community.
Hmm.
And so meeting Art and Francois and Charles Burns and Mark Beyer and all of those people, was wonderful. And and it was Mark Newgarden. There was a lot of people living in New York at that time that were cartoonists. There was a community,
Hmm.
and it revolved around Raw, and they were tough editors. So there was a lot of angst around that
Hmm.
because they would tell you to change stuff or they weren't going to run stuff, and then make enemies and worry about it. And but I talked to gee, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So I talk to Art about once a month, and
Yeah.
I love Art.
Mm.
And I talk to Charles less. Charles is more insular, but I love all these people.
Did they ever reject any of your work from Raw?
Well, they laughed at some of my ideas. I mean, there were things I wanted to do that were contrarian, like in that Jimbo and the Horse
Hmm.
strip. I wanted them to run the orange as black over black, so it'd be impossible to read,
I'm
and they
glad they
wouldn't
didn't
do
let
that.
you do that. I'm glad they
Yeah,
didn't.
they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to run black borders on comics, and that wasn't within their format. And so I want cartoonists. This kind of cartoonist that we are, we're used to designing our own stuff and getting our way,
Yeah.
like a lot of people don't. Novelists don't, and filmmakers don't,
Hmm.
and commercial artists don't, but we do. We're like one man loony bins.
What about the Ape Week puppet band? What the hell does that even mean? Well, what is
It
that?
was
Were you playing music at the same time as the puppets were going? Like what?
well, back then it was three of us: Rick Heitzman that worked with me on the Pee Wee show, and Jay
Uh-huh.
Cotton, who we all went to college together. And Jay wrote the original Pee Wee music for the stage show.
Hmm.
And so in Dallas, I graduated in '74, and when they graduated or finished with school, I said, let's form a performance art group and do puppets and stand-up comedy. And we did what we could do, and I
Yeah.
was kind of faking it. I just wanted to do something. And I think that Rick and Jay had more to offer in some ways, and Jay could write for symphony orchestra, so he was
Hmm.
writing stuff with the school orchestra that was the soundtrack for our that sounded like program music. It was professional. It looked sound like he could write in any style. So it was like James Bond or cartoon music, and that was a soundtrack for our puppet shows.
Okay.
And so we performed around Dallas, and we had a show in the Houston Museum, and then we broke up. Rick went to graduate school in Chicago, and I moved to LA, and then later Jay moved to LA.
Was this before Wayne White was doing his puppet shows?
Yeah, I met, well, Wayne was already doing puppet shows in Tennessee, and actually Wayne designed a kids show in Tennessee
Hmm.
before he was in New York. And so, we're all very capable. Actually, the exterior, I was just talking to Rick yesterday, uh, that the exterior model of the Playhouse is really inspired by Rick Heitzman's sculpture in college,
Oh.
uh, because mushrooms would grow in the cow shed out in the country. And I never took them, but I took other things. But Rick once boiled down 30 mushrooms and drank it and
Oh.
tripped for 2 weeks,
What?
and then started making these amazing paper sculptures. And so when it came time for me to design Pee Wee's Playhouse, I had those sculptures in mind, and I got him to oversee building the exterior model.
Wow.
So Pee Wee's Playhouse is kind of mushroom, magic mushroom inspired. Although we were very responsible about making this show for kids.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to turn kids into drug addicts or make dirty jokes. We were just being artists.
Yeah, Kaz says in that dummy zine that John Kelly did, he mentions that you had multiple studios in New York. You had like
Yeah,
you. How was that
I did.
possible at the time? That must have been really expensive.
Well, I mean, the reason I would give them up is because they'd get too expensive or, yeah, so I had to move around. So where Kaz visited, it was freezing. There was no heat in there. We were on the waterfront. And when I designed all the Pee Wee stuff with Norman Hathaway, we were freezing to death in there, and people were coming in fur coats and screaming at us to get approvals for these products and stuff. And
Huh.
it was kind of bizarre. It was very bizarre.
You
Pee
had
Wee was showbiz, and I'm not showbiz.
Yeah, but you would have like one studio would be for painting and one studio would be for doing something else, printmaking or
No,
something. What?
no, I had consecutive studios.
Oh, I
I only
see.
had one studio. I would have an apartment. I'd be working in the apartment, and then I'd, rent a studio and then move to a different studio. And I was
Oh,
always moving, schlepping all this stuff around and running out of money.
okay, okay. Because the way I read it, I was like, oh my God, Gary must have been like his career must have
No,
been banging. He had different studios in
no,
New York
no,
City.
no. I was starving to death, and also all these recessions kept happening.
Yeah.
And also people couldn't, like I said, people didn't know what I was going to do as an artist, so I didn't get a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. And then the show got canceled, and then you're just like, ah, shit. Or like, were you looking for another show to work on after that happened, or were you just like, I'm done with this stuff?
I tried to do a couple of things, but it was just a disaster and not fun, and it went nowhere. And then Paul wanted to try to do other shows, so we pitched an animated show
Mm-hmm.
that I mostly devised to Cartoon Network, and there wasn't money in it, so he wasn't interested in that.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to do, like a Broadway thing, and then the production company didn't want me, and so that was a bust. And I was interested in Pee Wee as a thing that would evolve. But
Yeah.
once it was on TV, people wanted to freeze it and nostalgify it.
Mm-hmm.
So if Pee Wee could have kept evolving, like the animated show was Earth is hit by a comet and destroyed, and the Pee Wee Playhouse and Pee Wee float in outer space for 1,000 years and mutate into something else.
Well, this was
That,
your
that
idea?
was the, yeah, that was the premise of the animated show. And I did sketches, whole sketchbook full of drawings for it, which I sold off because I got sick of lugging Pee Wee stuff around.
Yeah. And then didn't you wrote the original version of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the movie?
Paul and I wrote the original screenplay for Paramount, and it was writing it as a bad special effects movie.
Oh.
And so we would show like Fireball XL5 and Clutch Cargo and stuff to these executives who were chugging Maalox,
Hmm.
and they passed on it. And then he wrote the second version with Phil Hartman, and it
Okay.
got made.
What, hey, did you ever, when you won the Emmys, did you actually attend the ceremony?
Yeah, I think that the mom from Brady Bunch sat at our table, but it's the daytime Emmys. The cartoon Emmys aren't the same as the nighttime Emmys.
Oh, okay.
So you're there with the sound people and the editors and stuff like that. But it's still a big fancy event when you get served breakfast, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you wear a tux?
No, well, I wore a suit, you know, but
Mm.
I don't think I've ever worn a tux. You know, after going to church so much, I never want to wear a suit again. And after, you know, when I was in high school, my dad made me work in a funeral home, so I never want to go to a funeral or a wedding again, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so wear a suit, an itchy suit.